And across the ring, at 450 pounds from now, Atlantic City, New Jersey, King Kong Bundy.
Christopher Allen Pallies was born November 7, 1955, in Woodbury, New Jersey. Chris was one of 6 children born to a father who was a railroad freight agent and a mother who worked part-time in a department store. Growing up in Washington Township, New Jersey, Chris and his siblings attended Washington Township High School, where he became a 2-time regional champion as a heavyweight on the wrestling team. Chris also made himself known to ice cream lovers in the area, working at Haynes Dairy Bar alongside his brother Tim. Despite excelling in wrestling in high school, there were no aspirations of becoming a pro wrestler for Chris when he graduated in 1974. In fact, Chris's entry into pro wrestling came years later, all because of a misunderstanding. Chris's brother Tim had become a school teacher, and 2 of Tim's students happened to be the daughters of World Wrestling Federation referee Dick Worley. One day, Tim asked the girls to talk to their father about getting him tickets to a wrestling card. Nobody is sure exactly how the girls brought this up to their father, but by the time Worley received a request for tickets, he mistook it as a request about how to get into pro wrestling. Trying to find Tim's number in a phone book, Worley just looked for the last name Pallies and ended up calling Chris by mistake. Even though the phone call was completely out of the blue for Chris, it led to both he and his brother embarking on a pro wrestling career. Worley put them in contact with Larry Well, who wrestled in the Northeast U.S. and Canada under the name Larry Sharp. Sharp would later co-found the world-famous Monster Factory Wrestling School, but at the time, Sharp was a 5th-year wrestler willing to train anyone that could provide a place to do it. Chris rented the building for $390 a month, and he and Tim trained with Sharp for roughly a year before he helped get them booked for their first match with the World Wrestling Federation. It was actually Tim that debuted first on February 3, 1981, using the ring name Jack Carson. Tim took the loss against Hulk Hogan at the Agricultural Hall in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Tim would go on to appear sporadically in the WWF, mostly jobbing to the stars, while also appearing regularly in area outlaw promotions. Tim left wrestling in September 1983 and returned to full-time teaching, though he did return for one night in April 2018 as part of a battle royal for a New Evolution Wrestling in St. John's, Newfoundland. While waiting for his debut, Chris was given a piece of advice from Larry Sharp that would end up putting him on the fast track to the main event. Sharp told Chris it would take time to get experience, and not to get that experience in the WWF. Sharp told him to travel, go to different territories, deal with different fans, and learn from different wrestlers. When he got the experience he needed, then come back to the WWF. But first, he had to get started. Chris debuted just over a month after Tim on March 7, 1981 at the Civic Center in Baltimore, Maryland, using the ring name Chris Kenyon and losing to S.T. Jones in just over 6 minutes. Like his brother, Chris primarily jobbed to stars like Tony Atlas, Pedro Morales, and Mel Mascaras. He did pick up wins against other enhancement talent, including his first recorded win over Ron Shaw on May 9, 1981 in Irvington, New Jersey, as well as 2 wins over his brother. By August, Chris was ready to take Larry Sharp's advice and hit the road. While Tim stayed in the area, Chris made his way to the Mid-Atlantic Associated Southern Championship Wrestling, based in Knoxville, Tennessee. Using the name Crippler Cannon, Chris only had a couple of matches when Georgia Championship Wrestling called needing enhancement talent for TV and a job at the Omni that same night. SCW decided to send a new guy, and on August 29, 1981, Chris showed up at the WTBS studios in Atlanta for a tag team match on Georgia Championship Wrestling. Chris teamed with Bruno Sammartino Jr. to defeat David Sierra and Jeff Sword. That night, he faced Bruiser Brody at the Omni and, not surprisingly, took the loss. Oddly, it wasn't his match against the established star Bruiser Brody that was the key to Chris taking a huge step forward in the business. Gary Hart was watching the tag match on Georgia Championship Wrestling that Saturday afternoon and was impressed with the 6'4" kid from New Jersey. Hart immediately started cooking a plan to bring him to NWA Big Time Wrestling in Dallas, already having the perfect spot for him. After returning to Knoxville through September, Chris packed his bags and headed to Texas for his first push after just 6 months in the business. The story fans in Dallas were told was Chris had moved from Alaska to work in the oil fields and was presented as a fan that desperately wanted to break into the business, begging Fritz von Erich to train him. By late 1981, Fritz was nearing the end of a legendary career, and 3 of his 5 sons were already excelling in the business. Fritz agreed to train the newcomer to have one last protege before his entering retirement. Chris was renamed Big Daddy Bundy. As the story goes, that name came from combining the names of English wrestling star Big Daddy and notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. Wearing a pair of jeans with a rope belt, Bundy was presented as a regular guy catching his big break, which he kind of was. Big Daddy Bundy made his in-ring debut on October 25, 1981 at Dallas's Wrestling Star Wars card at Reunion Arena, losing by disqualification to Chang Chung, who you surely know better by the name Kendo Nagasaki. Despite the somewhat inauspicious start, Bundy was quickly put into high-profile matches. The next night in Fort Worth, he tagged with Al Madrill and David Von Erich in a 6-man tag victory over Bill Irwin, Frank Dusek, and Richard Blood. Not that Richard Blood. Not that Richard Blood either. This Richard Blood, who went by the name Tommy Wright most of his career. Through the end of 1981, Bundy was embraced by fans, fighting alongside the Von Erichs as he was drawn into their long-standing feud with Gary Hart's stable of wrestlers. Bundy picked up a notable win against the Great Kabuki in November in Fort Worth during a $1,000 10-minute challenge, then defeated everybody at the Christmas Star Wars card in a $10,000 14-man battle royal. Going into 1982, Bundy was established as a blossoming project of Fritz von Erich, a mountain of a man set to be the last great gift to wrestling from Fritz as Von Erich's career was brought to an end. Out of the blue, that all changed in February. In a 6-man tag match scheduled for February 15, 1982 at Will Rogers Memorial Center in Fort Worth, Fritz, Kevin, and Kerry Von Erich were set to face off against Gary Hart, the Great Kabuki, and the mystery partner. Hart and Kabuki came to the ring to stand across from the Von Erichs, building the tension for fans who wanted to know who the mystery partner was going to be for the match. Finally, Hart announced into the house mic, "Come on down, Big Daddy." As shocked fans looked on, Bundy came to the ring to tag with Hart and Kabuki, turning on his mentor, Fritz Von Erich. Later, fans learned Hart managed to get to Bundy and convinced him Fritz was holding him back. He pointed to the jeans and the rope belt Bundy had to wear, and told him he should be provided with proper wrestling gear. Hart told Bundy Fritz would be making sure he was paid more, and if Bundy became part of Hart's stable, he could negotiate better pay. With dollar signs in his eyes, Bundy signed with Hart. Now part of H&H Limited, the stable Hart co-owned with Armand Hussein, Bundy ditched the jeans and rope belt and was given a black singlet to wear in the ring. He also changed his name to something more fitting for a man of his stature, King Kong Bundy. The real reason Bundy was brought to Dallas started to take shape. Bundy wasn't brought in to be the last protege of a retiring hero. He was brought in to be the final monster for the hero to topple. All of this was coming together as the territory was expanding its television coverage and rebranding as World-Class Championship Wrestling. Now on Hart's side of the feud, Bundy tagged with various stablemates against the Von Erichs, primarily Bugsy McGraw. Tagging with McGraw secured Bundy's first championship, taking it away from a Von Erich in the process. Bundy and McGraw defeated Kerry Von Erich and Al Madrill for the American Tag Team Championship on April 11, 1982 at the Sportatorium in Dallas. Less than a month later, Bundy took his first singles title, again defeating a Von Erich. Bundy took the American Heavyweight Championship from Kerry on May 5, 1982 in Lawton, Oklahoma. Just over a year in the business, Bundy was the top heel in the Dallas territory, holding the top singles title and half of the top tag titles. Bundy was not only setting the tone for the rest of his career, he was setting things up for one of the biggest cards in Dallas wrestling history at the time. Fritz Von Erich was ready to retire, but wanted to go out with a big final statement. With Bundy holding the title Fritz had held more than any other wrestler, Fritz wanted to take that title away from the man who turned his back on him. Bundy would defend the American Heavyweight Championship against Fritz at the Star Wars Super Bowl of Wrestling on June 4, 1982 at Texas Stadium, what is commonly referred to as the Fritz Von Erich Retirement Show. Not only would the main event carry the stipulation that Gary Hart would be banned from ringside, but falls would count anywhere on the field at Texas Stadium. The match itself wasn't exactly a barn burner. Despite making great strides over the last year, Bundy was still green, and Fritz was probably 2 or 3 years past when he should have retired. Still, the sentiment of the match was loud and clear. The local hero steps into the ring to slay one more dragon before riding into the sunset. Fritz turned to the Iron Claw many times during the match, and the action heated up as the two brought the fight outside the ring. Finally, Fritz pinned Bundy in the end zone of Texas Stadium to win the match and retire the American Heavyweight Champion. Bundy would get the belt right back, as fans were told the National Wrestling Alliance recognized Fritz as champion for one day, but then returned the championship to Bundy. The reasoning to fans was a rule that conveniently said if someone retired after winning a championship without defending it, the title reverted back to the former champion. Fritz, being a former NWA president, probably should have known that, but otherwise it kept Miss Kayfabe happy. With Fritz now in retirement, Bundy and the rest of H&H Limited focused their feud on the younger Von Erichs, with Bundy eventually losing his belts and more to the local heroes. On July 5, 1982, Bundy and McGraw lost the American Tag Team Championship to Kevin and Kerry Von Erich in Fort Worth. Bundy then lost his tag team partner as H&H Limited turned on McGraw, setting things up for heel Bundy's first non-Von Erich feud. It was also around this time Bundy lost to Kevin Von Erich in a hair versus hair match in San Antonio, showing up on television bald and presenting the look he would carry the rest of his career. Meanwhile, Bundy was becoming more polished in the ring, showing speed and agility not expected from a man his size. Bundy even got a chance to face off against the former NWA World's Champion, defending the American title against Harley Race at the August 15th Star Wars card at Reunion Arena. That match ended in a double disqualification. While the feud against McGraw was primarily comedic fodder at spot shows as World Class traveled across Texas and Oklahoma, the Von Erichs were still the main focus. On September 6, 1982 in Fort Worth, Bundy's 83-day American title reign came to an end when he lost the belt to Kevin Von Erich. Bundy would not stay beltless for long, however. 4 days later in Dallas, Bundy tagged with Bill Irwin to take the American Tag Team Championship from Kevin and Kerry, making Bundy a 2-time tag champion. As 1982 drew to a close, it became apparent changes were coming. In Dallas on November 26, Bundy and Irwin dropped the American tag titles to a babyface team new to the area, the Fabulous Freebirds Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes. That Freebird team would famously turn on the Von Erichs at that year's Christmas Star Wars, starting one of the most famous feuds in wrestling history. That same night, King Kong Bundy challenged Kevin Von Erich for the American Heavyweight Championship, with Bundy losing by disqualification. It was the last time Bundy faced off against any of the Von Erichs in singles competition. More emphasis was put on the Bugsy McGraw feud for Bundy, which took a somewhat more serious turn going into 1983. That feud culminated in a loser leaves town match in San Antonio on February 13th, with Bundy taking the victory and McGraw heading to Mid-Atlantic. Bundy also left Gary Hart's stable and became a part of Skandar Akbar's Devastation Incorporated, but his association with the General would be fairly brief. While Bundy would later voice regret that he didn't stay longer as the territory was getting hot, at the time he saw that he was being edged out of the main event and was ready to move on. After a low-key feud with Tolayatsu, Bundy lost the loser leaves town match on April 11, 1983 in Fort Worth, though he would return for a handful of scattered matches. Bundy had his final world-class match at the June 17th Wrestling Star Wars at Reunion Arena, unsuccessfully challenging Giant Baba for the PWF Heavyweight Championship. During this time, Bundy began making appearances in nearby Mid-South. Other than the Star Wars card and an occasional trip to Houston, working exclusively in Bill Watts territory by the end of April 1983. His time in Mid-South was relatively short, but 2 things were added to Bundy's character that he carried the rest of his career. Now being billed as from Atlantic City, New Jersey, Bundy added the Atlantic City Avalanche as his finisher. Bundy would use his 400-plus pound frame to crush his opponent with a power slam, squash him in the corner after a running start, or use a running splash as his opponent was prone on the mat. Bundy had used those moves before, but they were now named and being presented as more lethal. It was a simple move, but with someone the size of Bundy that moves deceptively fast, it looked devastating. Bill Watts came up with the idea of the 5 count. Bundy announced he would insist on getting a 5 count instead of just 3 when he pinned an opponent. This way, nobody would have any excuses of getting a fast count, and it would leave no doubt they were defeated by the monster from Jersey. Bundy spent the summer bouncing from one short feud to another. A series of matches in June and July against North American champion Junkyard Dog led to some wild matches ending in DQ wins for JYD until Dog finally defeated Bundy in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Bundy also butted heads with Dusty Rhodes, facing off against the American Dream at the July 16th Superdome Extravaganza in a no disqualification taped fist match. The match could be won by pinfall or knockout, per the stipulations. The 6-minute match saw both men draw blood from the other before Bundy was thrown into the referee, who tumbled out of the ring. With the ref down, Bundy ally Ted DiBiase entered the ring and tried to attack Rhodes with a pair of brass knuckles, but Rhodes managed to hit DiBiase first, sending the brass knuckles flying. As Rhodes disposed of DiBiase, Bundy got the brass knuckles and knocked Rhodes out to win the match. Rhodes would get his revenge in another taped fist match in Houston, but Bundy came out on top in Oklahoma City to end the short series of matches. The team of Bundy and DiBiase came about after DiBiase's partner Hacksaw Jim Duggan turned face when he found out DiBiase had been making deals with Skandar Akbar behind his back. DiBiase brought Bundy in to replace Duggan in a tag team known as the Rat Pack, but the partnership would be brief. Thrust into DiBiase's feuds, Bundy faced Steve Williams in a loser leaves town match on September 18th in Oklahoma City, taking the loss and being forced out of the territory. This came shortly after DiBiase also lost the loser leaves town match against Duggan. Though their alliance would end with their Mid-South run, both Bundy and DiBiase left for Atlanta and Georgia Championship Wrestling. Presenting himself as more affluent and fashionable outside the ring in Georgia, Bundy was the same monster inside the ring. While beating notable wrestlers like Ernie Ladd and Ron Garvin in spot shows, Bundy usually beat 2 men at a time in handicap matches on television, all while still insisting on getting a 5 count. It wouldn't be long before Legion of Doom manager Paul Ellering enlisted the services of Bundy as an associate, while not making Bundy a full-fledged member of the stable. At the time, the Legion of Doom consisted of Ellering, the Spoiler, the Road Warriors, and Jake the Snake Roberts. Roberts was the World Television Champion and had been fending off a passionate Ron Garvin, who was desperately trying to win the title back. Ellering acquired the services of Bundy, who had defeated Garvin in a series of house and spot show matches. If Garvin could defeat Bundy in a 10-minute match, Roberts would give Garvin another title shot. For Bundy, Ellering would take into consideration bringing him into the Legion of Doom. Ellering came on television to discuss the situation with World Championship Wrestling host Gordon Solie, when Solie told viewers they were going to take a look at Bundy in action. As the visual cut to Bundy taking on Jesse Barr and Pat Rose in a handicap match, the audio stayed with Solie and Ellering, which Ellering didn't know. When Solie asked Ellering if he would make Bundy a member of the Legion of Doom, Ellering went on a rant belittling Bundy, calling him 450 pounds of jello, and that they couldn't afford to feed him. Ellering made it clear he was just using Bundy for what the Legion of Doom needed. Watching on a monitor in the back, Bundy heard every word and came out as the crowd began cheering. Cameras cut back to the live studio to show Bundy dragging Ellering to the ring where he began pounding on him. The Road Warriors came from the back to put Bundy in a 3-on-1 situation, but Sweet Brown Sugar and Pez Whatley came to his aid and helped fight off the Legion of Doom. Bundy came back out later on the show to tell the audience he had heard the same things Ellering said from people his whole life. Bundy would now set his sights on the Legion of Doom and offered to partner up with anybody that wanted to take on the Road Warriors. He didn't care who it was. King Kong Bundy was now a babyface. With the match already set for a card at the Omni, Ron Garvin defeated Bundy by countout as Bundy simply didn't go to the ring and gave Garvin his title shot. For Bundy, he began fielding offers for tag team partners to go against the Road Warriors, with Brett Sawyer being the first in line. Bundy and Sawyer handed the Road Warriors a rare loss in the Texas Tornado match in August, but Bundy wasn't done yet. Bundy teamed with various partners against Hawk and Animal, including Brad Armstrong, Pez Whatley, and Jay Youngblood, trying to take the National Tag Team Championship. All of those attempts fell short, but when Bundy finally teamed with Ron Garvin, it appeared the Road Warriors' title reign might come to an end. Bundy and Garvin defeated the Warriors in a series of non-title spot and house show matches at a time a losing streak was not part of the Road Warriors' vocabulary. When Bundy and Garvin did take on the Warriors with the belts on the line, they would win the matches by disqualification, meaning Hawk and Animal would keep the belts. It wasn't until Bundy teamed with Masked Superstar that the National Tag Championship was finally taken from the Road Warriors on May 6, 1984. The celebration would be short-lived, as fans were told Superstar was injured in the match and would be out of action for several weeks. In actuality, Superstar was just going on tour in Japan. Bundy tagged with King Tonga in a tournament to crown new champions, but it would be the Road Warriors regaining the titles. Bundy did get some further measure of revenge, crushing Paul Ellering in a lights-out match at the Omni, but it was apparent the run was coming to an end. Continuing to take the advice Larry Sharpe gave him when he first broke into the business, in July 1984, Bundy headed to Memphis and the Continental Wrestling Association. Back to being a heel, Bundy was part of Jimmy Hart's first family and quickly rose to the top of the card in a very active first few weeks in the territory. Bundy made his Memphis debut on July 9th and on July 30th defeated Tommy Rich for the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. In between defending that title through August and September, Bundy was in several tournaments in Memphis, but continually found himself as a bridesmaid. Bundy and tag team partner Rick Rude made it to the finals of a $10,000 tag tournament in Memphis, only to lose to Jerry Lawler and Jimmy Valiant. In another tournament the next night in Louisville, Kentucky, Bundy and Rude again made it to the finals, and again lost to Lawler and Valiant. At the beginning of September, Bundy made it to the finals of the CWA Cadillac tournament at Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, losing to Valiant in less than 5 minutes. In a one-night tournament in Lexington, Kentucky 3 nights later, Bundy again lost in the finals to Valiant. Despite coming up short in those tournaments, Bundy and Rude didn't leave Mid-South Coliseum empty-handed on October 8, 1984, winning a tournament final over the Fabulous Ones, the crowned new AWA Southern Tag Team Champions, and making Bundy a dual champion. The tag titles wouldn't last long, however, as the partnership with Rude came to an abrupt end after clashing with old foes. Winning the tournament and the Southern titles also gave Bundy and Rude a shot at the AWA World Tag Team Championship, now held by the Road Warriors. That match took place on October 15th in Memphis, and ended when Rude jumped off the top rope to hit Hawk, who was being held by Bundy. Hawk moved, and Rude hit Bundy instead, which led to Bundy and Rude losing the match. While there was some tension between Bundy and Rude following that match, they smoothed things over and headed into their first defense of the Southern Tag Team Championship a week later against Stan Lane and Steve Kern, the Fabulous Ones. Early in the match, Rude backed Kern into the ropes near the First Family corner and tried to hit him. Kern ducked, and again Rude hit Bundy. Angry and having an animated back and forth with manager Jimmy Hart, Bundy refused to tag into the match for several minutes and left Rude to be worn down by the Fabulous Ones. Eventually, Bundy did tag into the match, but still made it clear he wasn't happy with Rude. Later in the match, with the referee distracted, the legal man Rude held Stan Lane as Bundy moved in to hit him. Lane moved, and Bundy knocked Rude flat. That led to a pinfall victory for the Fabs, who took the tag championship. After the match, Bundy, Rude, and Hart had a heated discussion in the ring, with Hart making it clear he was taking Bundy's side. After Hart handed Bundy a chain, Bundy attacked Rude and busted his head open. Bundy and Hart pounded on Rude until Kern and Lane returned to the ring to chase them away. Bundy would be the primary focus as Rude feuded with the First Family, but it wouldn't last long. Fans were not taking to a babyface Rick Rude, and Bundy was ready to move on again. Rude would serve as special referee when Bundy dropped the Southern Heavyweight Championship to Jerry Lawler in a hair versus title match on November 12, 1984. In early December, Rude defeated Bundy in a loser leaves town match, sending Bundy out of the territory. Just to make note of it, Bundy did make some sporadic appearances for the AWA through October and November 1984, using the name Boom Boom Bundy. AWA owner Vern Gagne didn't like wrestlers to have similar names. Bundy used the name Boom Boom because Bruiser Brody used the name King Kong Bundy when he appeared in the AWA. Brody used King Kong in deference to Dick the Bruiser. As for Bundy's appearances, there wasn't much to them. Bundy and Jerry Blackwell won a couple of tag team battle royals, and Bundy did pick up notable wins over Larry Zbyszko and Billy Robinson. When his commitments in Memphis were done, Bundy made his first trip to Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling. The dynamic in Japan was a bit different, where babyface and heel were less important than Japanese or not. Due to this, Bundy's first match in Japan was a six-man tag victory, where he partnered with Hulk Hogan and Kerry Brown against Kantaro Hoshino, Antonio Inoki, and Tatsumi Fujinami. Of course, at this point, Hogan was less than a year into one of the biggest babyface runs in wrestling history as the World Wrestling Federation champion. Being paired with and against Hogan multiple times during his 6-week run in Japan turned out to be a blessing for Bundy. Hogan was always on the lookout for the next monster to topple, and knew Bundy would fit the bill. It was time for Bundy to come back to the World Wrestling Federation. King Kong Bundy made his WWF debut, at least under that name, on March 5, 1985 in Poughkeepsie, New York, with a 2-minute squash over Mario Mancini. And yes, he continued asking for a 5 count. Still being managed by Jimmy Hart, who debuted in the WWF just a few weeks earlier, it was clear Bundy was being set up as the unstoppable force. Over the next 2 months, Bundy ran through a series of enhancement talent in singles and handicap matches, also having his first WrestleMania match at the first WrestleMania. Coincidentally, Bundy's WrestleMania match was against S.D. Jones, the same wrestler he faced in his career debut 4 years earlier. This time Bundy won in 24 seconds. That would remain the shortest match in WrestleMania history before being broken by the Hart Foundation's 19-second win over the Bolsheviks at WrestleMania 6, and is the 6th shortest as of the making of this video. In what seemed like a natural matchup, Bundy also had several matches against Andre the Giant. Not only were fans eager to see the two behemoths take on each other, but it was the beginning of the standard of facing Andre before taking on Hogan in the WWF. Over the next several months, Bundy faced Andre in singles matches, usually ending with Andre winning by DQ, as well as tag matches with Bundy and John Studd, facing Andre and various partners like Hillbilly Jim and Tito Santana. Beginning on May 10th, Bundy spent most of the next 3 months touring Japan, though he did return for a week in June to devour more enhancement talent in WWF spot shows. In the middle of August, Bundy returned for a full-time schedule in the WWF, and a real push for the man Gorilla Monsoon dubbed the Walking Condominium started taking shape. In September, a trade was worked out between Jimmy Hart and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Heenan gave Hart the managerial contracts of both Adrian Adonis and the Missing Link in exchange for King Kong Bundy. Heenan had been obsessed with finding someone that could take the WWF Championship from Hulk Hogan and believed the monster from New Jersey was the man to do it. Almost immediately after joining Heenan, Bundy got his first shot at Hogan and the WWF title, losing by disqualification in Boston. Bundy got several more title shots over the next few weeks, with most of them ending in a Hogan victory by countout, though Hogan did gain a pinfall victory in another match in Boston on October 12, 1985. This scenario played out through the winter until it was time to set things up for Bundy's biggest match in the WWF, and many would say the biggest match of his career. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event that aired March 1, 1986, Hulk Hogan took on Heenan family member Don Morocco in the main event. As Hogan was about to score the pinfall victory, Bobby Heenan entered the ring and broke up the pin by kicking Hogan in the head. When Hogan grabbed Heenan to exact revenge, Bundy entered the ring and attacked Hogan from behind. Bundy and Morocco double-teamed the champion, with Morocco holding Hogan in place while Bundy delivered a series of avalanches in the corner. Bundy followed that up with 2 running splashes to leave Hogan motionless in the ring as other wrestlers came from the back to help. Finally, the time came for the payoff, with the Grand WrestleMania 2 held in 3 different locations on April 7, 1986. Matches would be in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, with the main event in California at the Los Angeles Sports Arena. King Kong Bundy challenged Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship, and as with most WrestleManias, there was an abundance of celebrity involvement. All of it would be happening in the big blue steel cage being used for the first time, specially reinforced because of the size of the participants. To win the match, Hogan and Bundy would have to climb out of the cage or leave through the cage door. Despite still having his ribs taped due to the attack by Bundy 3 weeks earlier, Hogan gained the advantage early. Eventually, Bundy hit Hogan with a low blow and started working over the champion's ribs. Bundy made several attempts to leave through the cage door, but Hogan managed to stop him just in time. Seeing it was going to take more to put Hogan down, Bundy ripped the protective tape from Hogan's ribs and used it to choke Hulk. It still wasn't enough, as Hogan again stopped Bundy from winning the match. After Hogan slammed Bundy's head into the cage to give the match a little blood, the 2 traded finishing maneuvers, with Bundy hitting Hogan with an avalanche and Hogan coming back with a leg drop. Finally, with Bobby Heenan trying to run interference, Hogan climbed out of the cage while Bundy tried to make it to the door. Hogan dropped down to win the match, retaining his championship and delivering some payback to Heenan before he was done. Looking back today, it was hardly a shocking outcome, but at the time it was Hogan slaying the first of many WrestleMania giants. For Bundy, it was reaching a peak before a slow slide down the WWF ladder. Bundy would get a few more title shots against Hogan over the next few weeks, but of course never won the title. Bundy would begin concentrating on tag matches, as he and Big John Studd feuded with Super Machine and Big Machine, which were Bill Eadie and Blackjack Mulligan wearing masks. That feud did get interesting when Giant Machine began making appearances. Bundy and other members of the Heenan family made accusations that Giant Machine was actually Andre the Giant hiding under the mask to get around being suspended for no showing an event. Of course, it was, but it was never proven. By November, Bundy and stablemate King Harley Race began a brief feud with the British Bulldogs over the WWF Tag Team Championship, but they never won the titles. More and more, Bundy found himself on the losing end of matches against Junkyard Dog, Kamala, and Jake Roberts, while still picking up the occasional victory. Perhaps nothing made it more clear that Bundy's main event days in the WWF were over, like WrestleMania 3 on March 29, 1987. After wrestling Hulk Hogan in the main event the previous year, Bundy was in the 3rd match on the card in what was little more than a comedy match. Bundy, Lord Littlebrook, and Little Tokyo faced Hillbilly Jim, Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver in a mixed tag match. That match ended with Bundy body slamming and giving an elbow drop to Little Beaver and getting disqualified. When he threatened to hit Beaver with a running splash, his partners turned on him and helped pull their opponent to safety. Years later, Bundy said he suspected the sudden fall in the pecking order stemmed from his landing a series of commercials for Bendix Head Start personal computers. It wasn't the fact that he did the commercials the WWF seemed to have a problem with. It was the fact that he got the commercials on his own without going through WWF channels. Bundy feuded with former Heenan family member Paul Orndorff through most of 1987, and a series of matches against Bam Bam Bigelow showed promise on paper, but Bundy always found himself on the losing end. Going into 1988, King Kong Bundy needed a rest, and Chris Pallies needed something different. Having his last recorded WWF match of the 1980s on February 22, 1988, Bundy and Butch Reed took the loss against Don Morocco and the Ultimate Warrior at Madison Square Garden in a tag team match. Bundy then went into semi-retirement. During his hiatus from the spotlight, Bundy continued to do the Head Start commercials and appeared in his first movie, the Richard Pryor comedy Moving, as well as making the first of 2 appearances on the Fox sitcom Married with Children. Bundy also owned and operated a bar, worked as a bouncer where he once saved comedian Jeff Garland from an attack by a drunk audience member, and met a woman named Marcy, who he would later marry, also adopting her son David. Out of the blue, after 5 years away from the ring, Bundy appeared as Terry Funk's mystery tag team partner at the first NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling pay-per-view, November to Remember. Funk's ECW Television Championship was on the line in the match, as well as Sabu's ECW Heavyweight Championship. Bundy would turn on Funk during the match, hitting him with an avalanche to help Sabu gain the victory. Bundy appeared sporadically in smaller promotions like the World Wrestling Association and NWA New Jersey over the next several months, finally landing in the United States Wrestling Association in August 1994. By that time, the USWA had a working relationship with the World Wrestling Federation, and by the end of August, Bundy was back in the WWF. Now a part of Ted DiBiase's $1 million corporation, Bundy's restart with the WWF was much the same as his start almost a decade earlier. Through November 1994, Bundy ran through a series of jobbers and a few scattered mid-carders to set up a series of matches against WWF champion Bret Hart. However, there would be no pay-per-view or even televised title matches. It was part of a WWF November Fall Fest tour in Germany, where Hart defeated Bundy in all 6 matches over the course of a week. Bundy was part of the $1 Million Corporation's victory at Survivor Series and made 2 unsuccessful attempts to win the Intercontinental Championship against Razor Ramon during TV tapings, but also in dark matches. Bundy continued to crush enhancement talent, but when he faced anybody higher on the card like Lex Luger, Diesel, or the British Bulldog, he took the loss. In hindsight, his biggest moment of 1995 was arguably losing to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 11, marking Undertaker's 4th consecutive WrestleMania victory, and a streak they really weren't talking about yet. Unhappy with his payoffs and realizing he was actually making more money in the independents main eventing rather than lingering in the WWF midcard, Bundy again left the WWF. Bundy's final WWF match was on October 15, 1995 at Memorial Auditorium in Utica, New York, a victory over Barry Horowitz. Bundy spent the next decade touring various indie promotions like the Pennsylvania-based Trans-America Wrestling Federation and New Jack City Wrestling in his home state of New Jersey. Bundy also had brief runs with various championships, winning the NWA New York Heavyweight Championship and the Maryland Championship Wrestling Championship, among others. Kong feuded with other former WWF stars in the indies like Jimmy Snuka, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Doink the Clown. There was also the infamous appearance at the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view in October 1999, but the less said about that, the better. On May 12, 2007, at the Boys and Girls Club in Springfield, Massachusetts, King Kong Bundy had the final match of his career for big-time wrestling. Bundy took the victory over Richard Byrne in the main event. In retirement, Bundy continued to dabble in entertainment, even taking a stab at stand-up comedy at small clubs in the Northeast U.S. He also added to his acting credits with roles like Otto Belmar and the 2011 independent film Fight the Panda Syndicate. In 2016, Bundy took part in a class action lawsuit against what was now known as World Wrestling Entertainment, alleging the company misrepresented and tried to conceal the extent of long-term neurological injuries wrestlers suffered. The case was dismissed in 2018, and many people feel his involvement in the lawsuit is the reason he is not in the WWE Hall of Fame. Just 6 months after the lawsuit was settled, Bundy was scheduled to appear at a convention in the New Jersey area. When he no-showed the event, friends called to check on him and were given heartbreaking news. King Kong Bundy passed away at his home in Glassboro, New Jersey from complications related to diabetes on March 4, 2019. He was 63 years old. When he wasn't the monster King Kong Bundy in the ring, Chris Pallies was known as just a regular guy with a big booming voice that liked to joke around and could take teasing as well as he could give it out. While some of those who worked with him will criticize Bundy for some of his work in the ring, it really comes off more as lighthearted teasing. As for Chris Pallies the man, It's a rarity to find someone that has a harsh word to say about him. Everyone from Jake Roberts to Kevin Nash to Greg Valentine typically start any comment about Bundy with, "He was such a good guy." A career journey that started with the seed of a wrong phone number ended with him going out on his own terms. In between, with what was a relatively short career, Chris Pally cemented the place of King Kong Bundy in the memory of wrestling fans from Texas to New York. Some of us were lucky enough to say we were there when the spotlight first centered on the big man from New Jersey and watched as the spotlight grew beyond pro wrestling.
Me. Did the Head Start's perspicuous panoply of programs really bring about a qualitative transmutation of my intellectual faculties, or was the amplification only a matter of degree? Je ne sais pas. One thing is certain, however, the power, performance, and sophistication of the Head Start computer can make a genius out of you, too. Head Start by Bendix, built to be compatible with you.